Al-Iqtisad fil I'tiqad, the fourth treatise, second chapter, on showing that it is obligatory to believe in matters reported in the Revelation and deemed possible by reason. It consists of an introduction in two sections. Introduction. What is not known through necessity is divided into that which is known through proof of reason, but not through the revelation. That which is known through the revelation, but not through reason, and that which is known through both. That which is known through a proof of reason, but is not through the revelation, is the occurrence of the world, and the existence of the originator, and his power, knowledge, and will. If any of this is not established, it cannot be established through the revelation. For revelation is founded on speech. Hence, if inner speech cannot establish something, then the revelation cannot establish it either. It is impossible for anything that is prior in rank to inner speech to be established by inner speech, and what is founded on it. Speech itself, according to our description, also cannot be established through the revelation. However, some of the investigators argued and claimed that it can, as we previously indicated. Regarding that which is only known through the revelation, it specifies one of two possibilities as the actual one. This is inaccessible to the intellect independently. It can only be known from God, exalted is He, through revelation and inspiration, and we know it through hearing from the one to whom it is revealed. These are such things as the resurrection and congregation, reward and punishment, and the like. That which is known through both is everything that is within the bounds of reason and posterior in rank to God's speech. For instance, the issue of seeing God and God's being the exclusive creator of all the movements and modes, and whatever is analogous to these. Furthermore, whatever is claimed to be revealed must be examined. If reason deems it possible, then it must be believed, and conclusively, if the testimonial evidence is conclusive and does not permit its content and testimonial chain to be regarded as merely likely. If the evidence is probabilistic, then it must be believed as a likelihood. The obligation to believe with one's tongue and heart is an act, like other acts, that can be found on probabilistic evidence. For instance, we know conclusively that the companions rebuffed everyone who claimed that a servant of God might be the creator of anything or any mode. They denied that merely on the basis of God's statement, God is the creator of everything. What about when it says that He's Ahsanul Khaliqin, that He's the most bestest of the creators? Okay. Because that means that creator is not something that's only, it's an attribute that people can manifest, but not the creator, of course, because He's the creator of everything. So that's what it's saying, when the creator, okay. Although the statement is universal, it might be particular, so it could be particular. Hence, its being universal is a matter of likelihood. The matter becomes conclusive through an investigation of the rational methods that we have stated. However, we know that they used to deny that before investigating rational methods. Thus, it should not be assumed that they allowed probabilistic evidence only in matters of jurisprudence. On the contrary, they also allowed it in affirming matters of belief and testimony. Regarding what reason deems impossible, if it is reported in the revelation, it must be interpreted metaphorically. It is inconceivable that the revelation contains what is conclusively contrary to reason. Most of the hadiths that are literally anthropomorphic are inauthentic. And those of them that are authentic are not conclusive, but are amenable to metaphorical interpretation. If reason is neutral regarding a certain thing, not deeming it impossible or possible, then it must be believed because of the availability of testimonial evidence. It is sufficient for believing it that reason does not deem it impossible, and it's not required that reason deem it possible. There is a difference between the two cases. A difference that a dull mind might not notice, so that it does not comprehend the difference between one saying, I know that the matter is possible, and his saying, I don't know whether it is impossible or possible. The difference between them is as great as that between heaven and earth. The first is possible with respect to God, and the second is not possible. For the first is having knowledge of a thing's possibility, and the second is not having knowledge of a thing's impossibility. In both cases, affirmation is obligatory. This, then, is the introduction. The first section of chapter 2, right? This concerns showing that reason affirms what is revealed. regarding the resurrection and congregation, the torment of the grave, the path, and the balance. Resurrection. Regarding resurrection, we mean by it the reoccurring of creation. It is proved through conclusive evidence in the Revelation, and it is possible on the basis of the first creation. For to recreate is a second creation, which is no different from creating originally. It is called recreation only in relation to the previous origination. He who is capable of creating and originating is capable of recreating. This is what is intended by the Exalted's statement. Say, he will give them life who created them for the first time. It might be said, what do you mean? Are the substances of modes annihilated and then all recreated? Or are the modes annihilated but not the substances? And is it the modes that are recreated? We say that all of this is possible. There's no conclusive proof in the Revelation that certifies one of these possibilities. One of these possibilities is that the modes are annihilated, and the body of man remains, having the form of dust. For instance, thus life, color, moistness, composition, shape, and other modes are removed from it. The meaning of recreating them would be that those modes themselves are brought back to the body, or that it is given again modes similar to them. For us, a mode does not persist. Life is a mode, and the existent is at every hour another mode. And the man is by man virtue of his body. He is one not by virtue of his modes, for every mode is renewed, and is not the previous mode. Hence it is not a necessary condition for recreation that the same modes be recreated. We mention this because some of our colleagues have concluded that it's impossible to recreate the same modes. This is false. However, the arguments for its falsity are elaborate. There is no need for this, given our purpose here. The second possibility is that bodies are annihilated as well, and then recreated by being originated for the second time. It might be said, in what way is the recreated body distinguished from the first? And what is the meaning of your statement that the recreated body is exactly the same as the first, when what is non-existent has no continuation, has no continuing identity, which would allow the same one to be brought back? We reply, in God's knowledge, the non-existent is divided into that which had previous existence and that which had no previous existence. Just as anteriorly eternal non-existence is divided into that which will have existence and that which God knows will have no existence. This division, according to God's knowledge, cannot be denied, for God's knowledge is comprehensive and his power is all-encompassing. The meaning of recreating the same thing is substituting existence for a non-existence that had previous existence, and of creating its counterpart, originating existence for a non-existence that had no previous existence. This is the meaning of recreating. So long as a body is supposed to persist, and the issue is reduced to renewing modes that are replicas of the first ones, the revelation has been affirmed, and the problem of recreating and distinguishing the recreated thing from the first is resolved. We have discussed this matter with elaboration in the book The Incoherence of the Philosophers, and based our refutation of their doctrine on positing the persistence of the soul, which for them is not extended, and positing its return to govern a body, whether this body is the exact same body of the man or another body. This is a necessary consequence that is not in accordance with what we believe. Who was it? Was it Ibn Rushd who wrote The Incoherence of Incoherence as a reply to the incoherence of philosophy? Because Ibn Rushd was he interpreted, like he commented, he did commentaries on Plato, Aristotle, and a very, very smart guy. He's a very great jurist also. He had volumes of jurisprudence of his, but his philosophy was interesting. He translated, he commented, he did a commentary on Plato and Aristotle, and very into Greek philosophy. And then Al-Ghazali was like, no, that's Incoherence of the Philosophers. He wrote, it's very good. And but then Ibn Rushd came back, and the title of his book was even, I like it. He just called it The Incoherence of Incoherence. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's not has nothing to do with this right now, except for they mentioned the book The Incoherence of the Philosophers, and I was just thinking of that little, that I don't know what it's called, battle, war, I don't know, that argumentation that of the intellectuals in the Muslim world back in the day. This is okay. This is a necessary consequence that is not in accordance with what we believe. For that book was composed to refute their doctrines. So the Incoherence of Philosophers was composed to refute their doctrines, not to establish the true doctrines. So it wasn't to establish the true doctrines, to refute the doctrines of the philosophers, the Greeks, the philosophers, given that they assumed that man is what he is by virtue of his soul, and that his occupation with governing a body is accidental to him, and since according to them, the body is an instrument, we made it necessary for them, since they believe in the persistence of the soul, to affirm the reality of recreation as the return of the soul to its governing a body, any body. To give now a theoretical verification of what we stated in this chapter would lead us to an investigation into the spirit, the soul, life, and what is true of them. The fundamental beliefs should not be burdened with such penetration into these limits of the intelligibles. What we have mentioned is sufficient for explaining the moderation and belief regarding what is reported in the Revelation. The torment in the grave. As for the torment of the grave, it is proved conclusively in the Revelation. Widely transmitted reports indicate that the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, anhum, they sought refuge from it in their supplications to God. A famous statement of the Prophet was when he passed by two graves is, "They are both being tormented." Another proof for it is God's statement, "And a dreadful torment engulfed the people of Pharaoh, the fire. They are exposed to it morning and evening," to the end of the verse. Since it is possible, it is obligatory to believe in it. The manner in which it is possible is apparent. However, the Mu'tazilites deny it, for they say, "We see the dead person visible, and he is not being tormented. Besides, the dead might be devoured and eaten by lions." This is madness. As for observing a person, this is an outward observation of the body. What experiences the torment, however, is part of the heart or of the inner self, whatever that may be. It is not necessary for being tormented to exhibit an outward bodily movement. The one who observes the appearance of a sleeping person does not see what the sleeping person feels of pleasure when he is a nocturnal emission, and of pain when he imagines a beating and the like. If the sleeping person wakes up and relates his visions, pleasures, and pains, someone who never experienced sleep would readily believe him, being deceived by the outward calmness of his body. Then he observed him. This is similar to the Mu'tazilites' denial of the torment of the grave. Regarding the one whom the lions devoured, the most one needs to say is that the belly of the lion is a grave. Bringing life again to a part that can perceive pain is possible. Not everyone who feels pain feels it in his whole body. As for Munkar and Nakir's questioning the dead, those are the two angels that question Munkar and Nakir. It is true, and believing in it is obligatory because it is reported in the Revelation and because it's possible. What is required of them is only to induce understanding either with or without sound, and what is required of him is only to understand. Understanding requires nothing but life, and man does not understand through the whole of his body, but only through a part of the inside of his heart. Bringing life to a part that understands a question and answers it is possible, and within God's power. There remains someone's statement, "We see the dead, but we do not see Munkar and Nakir. We do not hear their voices when they ask questions, and we do not hear the voice of the deceased when he answers." This would necessarily imply the denial of the Prophet seeing Jibril, peace be upon him, and his hearing of Jibril's speech, and Jibril's hearing of his answer. He who believes in the revelation cannot deny this, for it only requires that God create in him a hearing of that voice and a seeing of that individual. And these were not created in the ones present near him, nor in Aisha, may God be pleased with her, radiallahu anha, though she used to be present near him at the time he was in the midst of receiving a revelation. Denying this is rooted in atheism and in the denial of the far extent of God's power. We have concluded our refutation of it. To deny this would also necessarily imply denying the visions of a sleeping person and his hearing of loud, disturbing sounds. If it were not for the experience, one would readily disbelieve all those who hear from one who has slept a tale about his affairs. Woe to that person whose imagination falls short of appreciating that God's power encompasses these matters, which are trivial in relation to the creation of the heavens and the earth, and what is between them, and the wonders they contain. The reason those who have gone astray turn away from believing in these matters is precisely the reason they would, were it not for observation forcing them to believe this, turn away from believing that man, with all the wonders and marvels that he contains, is created from a filthy drop. Khasimu mubin, clearly just a despised nutfa. Huwa alladhi khalaqa al-insana min nutfa. He created man from a nutfa, just a small drop of semen or whatever that would literally mean. Nutfatin. فَإِذَا هُوَ خَصِيمٌ مُبِينٌ. And he is clearly defiant. So no, it's not filthy drop. Man, what is that? It's in Surah Sajda they talk about. Man, I forget the wording. So And then, or why isn't he thankful? So I'm not going to get into that right now because I'll have to look it up and okay. But so I'm chasimu means like clearly, he's he's forward in clear. I guess I don't know. Chasimu loss. Is that related to chasirun, which means losers? But he's forgetful of his creation and what he was created from, and he's ungrateful, clearly, unjustly. This is impossible. Therefore, that for which there is no proof that is impossible must not be denied due to the mere unlikelihood. Then the balance. As for the balance, it too is true. It's proved in the revelation conclusively. Since it is possible, it is obligatory to believe in it. It might be said, how are the deeds weighed when they are modes that have ceased to exist, and what has ceased to exist cannot be weighed? If it is posited that they are brought back and created in the body of the balance, this would be impossible, since it is impossible to bring back modes. How could the movement of a man's hand, which is an expression of obedience, be created in the body of the balance? Does the balance move with it, so that it would be a movement of the balance and not the movement of a man's hand? Or does the balance not move, and hence the movement would subsist in a body that does not move with it, which is impossible? Furthermore, if the balance moves, its tilt would vary according to the durations and numbers of movements, and not according to the rank of their merits. For a movement of the part might be more sinful by miles than the movement of the whole body. This is impossible. We say that God's messenger, may God bless him and grant him peace, was asked about this. He said, the sheets of deeds are weighed, for the noble scribes write down the deeds in sheets which are bodies. If they are placed in the balance, God, great and glorious as he, creates in its pan a tilt that is equivalent to the rank of the good deeds, and he has the power to do what he wishes. It might be said, what benefit is there in this? And what is the meaning of this reckoning? We say that no benefit is to be sought in an act of God, exalted as he. For he says he is not questioned about what he does, but they are questioned about what they do. So he is not questioned, but they are questioned. I don't know where about what they do is that's not in the Arabic. We have proved this, but I guess they are questioned. Yeah, I guess it's about what they do. That's implied. We have proved this. Moreover, it is not unlikely that there is a benefit in this. The servant of God would see the magnitude of his deeds, and he would know that he is being recompensed fairly, or that he is being forgiven by an act of grace. It is not unlikely that he who is intent on punishing his agent for a misdeed regarding his property, or is intent on forgiving him, would make it most clear to his agent the magnitude of his misdeed, so that he may know that the man is being fair in punishing him, or that he is being gracious in forgiving him. This is a benefit. This is a benefit that is sought in God's acts, and we've refuted this. The path, or the sirat. Regarding the path, it is also true, and because it is possible, it's obligatory to believe in it. It is a bridge that extends over the surface of hell. All of mankind will walk on this bridge, and when they arrive there, it will be said to the angels, and stop them, for they must be questioned. It might also be said, how is this possible when, according to what has been narrated, the path is finer than a hair and sharper than a sword? Thus, how is it possible to pass over it? We say that if this question is asked by someone who denies the power of God, then our response to him is to establish the all-encompassing nature of his power, and we have already done so. On the other hand, if it is asked by someone who affirms his power, then walking on the path is no more wondrous than walking on the air. The Lord, glorious and exalted as he, is capable of creating the power to do this. Its meaning is that he creates in the person the power to walk on air, and he neither creates in his essence a disposition to fall down, nor does he create in the air a disposition to part. If this is possible with air, it is surely possible with the path, which is in any case more solid than air. The second section of this chapter. Let's read this quick. I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. This section concerns apologizing for not including sections that could have been dealt with in matters of belief that I deemed more proper to refrain from discussing, because a brief discussion of belief should contain only the important matters that are essential for a description of sound belief. As for matters that there is no need to bring to mind, and that, if brought to mind, are such that there would be no harm in not learning about and not knowing their requirements, wading through them to discover the truth of the matter is not suitable to what is required to refine the fundamental beliefs. Such a study consists of three types of subjects: intellectual, semantical, and legal. An example of an intellectual subject is an investigation into the occurrent power, into whether it attaches to two opposites or not, whether it attaches to different objects or not, whether it is possible for an occurrent power to attach to an act occurring in a place different from the place of the power in similar matters. An example of a semantical subject is an investigation into that which is referred to by the term sustenance. What is it? And what are the limits and reference of the terms success, failure, and faith? An example of a legal subject is an investigation into what is obligatory to enjoin the good, and what the condition of repentance is, and comparable matters. All of this is not important for religion. What is important is for man to remove any doubts that occur to him regarding the essence of God, exalted as He, to the extent we discussed in the first treatise, regarding His attributes and their characteristics, as we discussed in the second treatise. Regarding His acts in order to believe that they are possible and not obligatory, as discussed in the third treatise. And regarding God's messenger, may God bless and grant him peace, in order to know His truthfulness and to believe all that He related, as we discussed in this treatise. What is outside these matters is not important. However, we will discuss with respect to each type one of the issues that we ignored, in order to know the issues that are similar to it, and to show that it is outside of the important issues which are sought in matters of belief. An intellectual issue. As for an intellectual issue, there is, for instance, the disagreement among people regarding one who is killed. It is to be said that he died at his predestined time. Is it to be said that he died at his predestined time? And if it is supposed that he was not killed, is it necessary that he die at any time or not? There is no harm in avoiding the subject, but we will describe an approach to its solution. Hence we say, if one of two things is not correlated with the other, but they occur together, then to posit the non-occurrence of the one of them does not necessitate a non-occurrence of the other. For instance, if Zayd and Amr died together, and then we suppose the non-occurrence of Zayd's death, neither the non-occurrence of Amr's death nor the occurrence of his death follows from this. Similarly, if Zayd dies... Who is it?
Can I come up and get something? I can wait.
Sure. What are you getting?
My stash here for my videos.
Oh, you have videos over there? Are you watching it, or?
I want to show them snapping to it with the range.
Oh.
Eventually, I don't have to do it now. I just wanted to see where they were. It's on my project to make a thing for you guys, for the kids. Am I interrupting your work or something?
What are you getting?
For Grandpa.
Yeah, I know.
About Navy.
Oh, the Navy? Yeah.
Well, I've heard lots of stories. Oh, well, maybe I'll come back up and look later. Oh, here they are.
You found them? Do you have can you play DVDs? Do you have a DVD? Is it a DVD or is it a...
Yeah, I can play everything.
What is it? Are they videos or DVDs?
DVDs. I have videos, DVDs. I have videos.
And you can play them all? You haven't like transferred them to like what kind of card is it? SDS or something, or S?
My big project for this year, well, it's going to be, and now I will finish, is I've got all your kids' pictures. Like I've got a drawer for you, Roderick, each one.
Mm-hmm.
And a bin for the girls. And I'm going to try to get all of these, my videos over the years, transferred and put on a...
Yeah, and by the time that is all transferred, it'll be a new thing, probably.
Probably. But at least you can transfer.
Yeah.
But that way you kids each have copy of our whole family stuff.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And then I've got photographs that I would like to do, kind of like a grouping of maybe family history pictures, like in those Shutterfly things, with Dad and me when we were young, and the next one of our family as we're going older. I'd like to, it'll probably take like a few volumes.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to have for each of you kids, and that would be like a gift, like...
Right.
Something like that. So, anyway. Hope I get it done sometime.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I asked when I found out I had that colon cancer, I thought, I better get on this. I may not have
Yeah, you never know.
You
It's a reminder, huh? So, where Okay. Similarly, if Zayd dies during a lunar eclipse, and we suppose the non-occurrence of the death, the non-occurrence of the eclipse does not necessarily follow from this. And if we suppose the non-occurrence of the eclipse, the non-occurrence of the death does not follow, for none of them is correlated with the other. As for two things, correlation does not indicate causation. As for two things between which there's a relation and correlation, there are three categories. Oh, so even that's even if it is correlated, it doesn't indicate causation. They haven't got to that yet. Okay, correlation. There are three categories. One of them is the relation of equivalence, such as the relation between, such as the relation between right and left, and between above and below. It is necessary that one of them would be absent if the other is supposed to be absent, because they are related to each other, such that the true nature of one of them. So they do. It is causation, because if there's one, there has to be another, right? Because they are related to each other such that the true nature of one of them cannot only subsist with the other's subsistence. The second is that they are not equivalent, but one of them is prior in rank, such as the condition and the conditioned. It is known that the absence of the condition necessitates the absence of the conditioned. Thus, if we see one's knowledge together with his being alive, and his will together with the knowledge of knowledge, the absence of knowledge necessarily follows from supposing the absence of life, and the absence of will from the absence of knowledge. This is expressed as a condition. If it is that which must exist in order for the other thing to exist, well, the existence of the other thing is not through it, rather it is with it. The third is that the relation is between a cause and an effect. The absence of the effect necessarily follows from supposing the absence of the cause, if the effect has only one cause. If it is imagined that it has more than one cause, the absence of the effect necessarily follows from supposing the absence of all the causes. The absence of all effects does not necessarily follow from supposing the absence of a cause, but only the absence of that cause's specific event follows. A specific effect follows. After explaining this meaning, we return to the issue of killing and death. Killing is severing the head, and it consists of modes that are the movements of the beheader's hand and of the sword, and of modes that are the separation of parts of the beheaded's neck. Another mode co-occurs with these modes, namely death. If there is no correlation between the severing and death, the absence of death does not follow from supposing the absence of severing, for they are two things created together, co-occurring in accordance with the habitual course of things. But there is no correlation between one and the other. They are similar to co-occurring things that are not co-occurrent, according to the habitual course of things. If the severing of the head is the cause and originator of death, and there is no other cause, the absence of death necessarily follows from its absence. Among those who affirm causation, there is no disagreement regarding the deaths having causes other than severing the head, such as ailments and internal causes. Hence, the absence of death does not follow absolutely from the absence of severing unless the absence of the rest of the causes is supposed in addition to this. We return to our purpose when we say that among the followers of the Sunnah who believes that God is the exclusive originator, that there is no generation and no created thing is the cause of a created thing, would say, the Lord, exalted as He, is the exclusive originator of the conjunction of death and the severing of the head. Hence, supposing the absence of severing does not necessitate the absence of death. This is the truth. He who believes that the severing of the head is a cause and adds to this his observation of a sound body and of no other external causes of death believes that if the severing is absent and there is no other cause, then the effect must be absent too, since all causes are absent. This belief is correct. If it is correct to believe in causation and to restrict all causes to what is known to be absent, therefore the dispute over this issue is prolonged. Al-Iqtisad fil I'tiqad. Do you want to read it? Hear it? Yeah. All right. Therefore, the dispute over this issue is prolonged. Most of the investigators of it do not appreciate its source. Hence, the solution to it must be sought in the canon we mentioned, regarding the omnipresence of God's power and the annulment of generation. On the basis of this, it must be said about the one who is killed that he died at his predestined time. For this predestined time is the time at which God created his death, whether it was accompanied with the severing of the head, a lunar eclipse, the falling of rain, or not. All of these events for us are co-occurrence and not causes, but some co-occur repeatedly according to the habitual course of things, and some do not. However, some posit a natural cause for death arising from our disposition, and claim that every temper has a designated degree of potentiality. If it is left without interference, it will reach the end of its natural duration, and if it is corrupted by way of destruction, there would be a shortening of its duration in relation to its natural requirement. A predestined time is the natural duration. For instance, it might be said that a wall will last 100 years according to the characteristics of its build, but it might be demolished by an axe immediately. Its predestined time is a way of expressing its duration that is in accordance with its essence and potentiality. Hence, it would be necessary to say that if it is demolished by an axe, it is not demolished at its predestined time. And if nothing happens to it externally until it falls apart, it would be said that it fell apart at its predestined time. The expression predestined time is understood according to this principle. A semantical issue. As for the second issue, which is semantical, there is, for instance, the disagreement among people regarding faith. Does it increase and decrease, or is it always at the same level? The source of this disagreement is not knowing that the term is ambiguous. I mean the term faith. Once the denotations of this term are distinguished, disagreement is removed. The term has three meanings. It might be used to express certain and demonstrative belief. It might also be used to express a conformist belief, which is unquestionable. It might further be used to express belief that is accompanied by deeds in accordance with it. The proof that it is used to express the first meaning is what we know, is that he who knows by God by means of a proof and dies after having this knowledge is judged to have died a believer. The proof that it is used to express conformist belief is that the populace of the Arabs believed God's messenger, may God bless him and grant peace, merely because of his goodness and kindness to them, and because of their reflection on the states of his affairs, without reflection on proofs from monotheism and on the implications of his miracles. And the prophet used to affirm their faith, God great and glorious as he says, you will never believe us. That is, you will not be a believer. God's messenger, may God bless him and grant him peace, did not distinguish between the different types of belief. The proof that it is used to express deeds is the prophet saying, the adulterer does not commit adultery while he is a believer. And his saying, faith has more than 70 divisions, the least of which is the removal of an obstacle from the road. We return to our purpose, and we say that if faith is used in the sense of demonstrative belief, it cannot be imagined to increase or decrease. Rather, certainty, if it is achieved with completion, cannot be increased. And if it's achieved without completion, then it is not certainty. Certainty is an all or nothing property, in which no increase or decrease is imaginable, unless what is intended is an increase in clarity. That is, an increase in the reassurance of the soul. For the soul at first is reassured to some extent regarding theoretical beliefs that are certain. When proofs accumulate regarding a single matter, this accumulation of evidence has the benefit of increasing the reassurance. Everyone who studies the science is aware of a variation in his soul's reassurance regarding necessary knowledge, such as that 2 is greater than 1 and the world is an occurrent and its originator is 1. He is also aware of the variation between issues due to the abundance or scarcity of their proofs. The variation in the reassurance of the soul is apparent to anyone through introspection. If increase is explained in this sense, it need not be withheld from believing with certainty. If faith is used in the sense of conformist belief, then in no way can one deny variation in it. For we apprehend through observation a variation in the states of a Jew or a Christian and a Muslim regarding their commitments to their beliefs. One of them might be such that no amount of intimidation, frightening, scientific verification, or imaginative convincing would have an effect on him or diminish the hold of dogma on his heart. And in the case of another, in spite of his being determined in his belief, his heart might be more compliant with respect to accepting what is certain. This is because of the dogma in one's heart is like a commitment in which there is none of the relief and comfort or certainty. And a commitment varies in its strength or weakness. No fair-minded person would deny this type of variation. It is only denied by those who have heard the names of sciences and beliefs, but their souls have never perceived their true nature, and they have never taken notice of the variation of their states and the states of others regarding these matters. If faith is used in the third sense, which includes acting in addition to having belief, it is obvious that variation is applicable to action. Right? You say you believe, I show you my proof by my, show you my belief by my deeds. You gotta, SubhanAllah. If faith is used in the third sense, which includes acting or addition to having believed, aminu wa amilu salihah. So aminu, believe, wa amilu salih. Then they do good deeds, right? They believe in. So there's two things. In this sense. In the third sense. And faith is used in the third sense, which includes acting in addition to having belief. It is obvious that variation is applicable to action. However, does persistence in action lead to variation in belief? This requires reflection. It is more proper in this regard to abandon pretense. The truth lies in the best of what is said about this subject. So I say that persistence in performing pious deeds has the effect of strengthening the soul's confidence regarding conformist belief, and of securing it in the soul. This is a matter that is known only to the one who introspects the states of his soul, monitors them during his persistence in performing pious deeds, and during his lack of persistence, and observes a variation in the state of his inner self. His comfort with his beliefs increases because of his persistence in action, and his confidence becomes stronger. In fact, a believer who for long persisted in action in accordance with his belief is much more resistant to being influenced by one who is trying to change him and create doubts in him than a believer who has been persistent for a short time. Indeed, the habitual course of things requires this. For if one who feels in his heart mercy for an orphan pats him on the head and looks after him, he would discover in his heart when he does acts in accordance with mercy, an increase in the depths of mercy. And if one who feels in his heart humbleness with respect to another acts in accordance with this humbleness by prostrating himself before him and kissing his hand, his veneration of and humbleness with respect to the other increases. It is for this reason that we worship God by persisting in acts that are required by the harsh veneration of him, acts such as bowing and prostrating, which lead to an increase in the harsh veneration of him. These are matters that are denied by those who are pedantic in their speech, and who come to know the structure of the sciences by hearing their names without apprehending them, through the experience of theoretical reflection. This is the truth regarding this issue. An issue of this type is people's disagreement regarding the meaning of provision. The Mutazilites say that this consists of what a man owns, so they thought it necessary that God makes no provisions for animals. They might also say that it is what is gained lawfully. We say to them, it follows that unjust men would die after living all their lives without ever receiving provisions from God. Our colleagues say that provision consists of whatever one makes use of, and that is divided into that which is lawful and that which is unlawful, and they elaborate on the definition of provision and the definition of grace. To waste time in such matters is the practice of one who does not distinguish between what is important and what is not, and who does not appreciate the value of the remainder of his life and the insignificance of the issue. One's life must be spent only on that which is important. The theorists face problematic issues, such that investigating them is more important than investigating the conditions of using certain terms and the requirements of that usage. We ask God to guide us to occupy ourselves with what is relevant to us. Then the last part, a legal issue. As for the third issue, which is legal, I hope this is the last part. There is, for instance, the disagreement among people regarding a sinner. May he enjoin the good and forbid the evil? This requires a legal reflection. How then can it be appropriate to discuss it here, and briefly? At any rate, we say that the truth is that he may enjoin the good and forbid evil. The approach is to present the matter in stages. Thus we ask, is it a requirement for enjoining the good and forbidding evil that one who enjoins and forbids evil be infallible with respect to minor and major sins? If this were made a requirement, then the consensus would be breached, for the prophet's infallibility with respect to major sins is known through the revelation, but with respect to minor sins is disputable. Where can an infallible person be found in this world? If not, read the last ayah of Surah Al-Fatir. If on the other hand, they say that this is not or Surah Fatir, right? If they say this is not a requirement, since the man who wears silk, for instance, though he is being disobedient to God, may forbid others from committing adultery and drinking alcohol, then we ask, may the one who drinks alcohol disapprove of the infidel's unbelief, try to prevent him from subscribing to unbelief, and even fight him because of it? If they say no, they breach the consensus. For the Muslim armies consistently contain both those who commit sins and those who are obedient to God. Yet none is prevented from the fight, neither during the time of God's messenger, peace be upon him, or during the time of his companions and their followers. If they say yes, we ask, may the one who drinks alcohol prohibit murder or not? If they say no, we ask, what's the difference between this one and the one who wears silk, yet the man who wears silk yet prohibits the drinking of alcohol, and the adulterer who prohibits unbelief? Just as a major sin is greater than a minor sin, major sins also vary. If they say yes and confine the one who commits a sin to prohibiting a greater sin, but not an equivalent or a lesser one, then this would be arbitrary and without foundation. For adultery is a greater sin than drinking alcohol. Yet it is not unlikely that one might commit adultery while prohibiting the consumption of alcohol and refraining from it. In fact, he might even drink alcohol, yet prohibit his servants and friends from drinking, and say, refraining from drinking is obligatory upon you and me, and to command one to refrain from what is prohibited is obligatory upon me, just as my refraining from it is. I may come closer to God by performing one of these two obligations. My refraining from one of them does not necessitate my refraining from the other. Therefore, just as it is permissible for him not to command another to refrain from drinking, while he himself refrains from drinking, it is permissible for him to command others to refrain from drinking while he does not refrain from drinking. Both of these are obligatory. Not performing the one does not necessitate not performing the other. It might be said, repugnant consequences follow from this. For instance, a man might commit adultery with a woman who he has coerced, and when she chooses to unveil her face, he might say to her, well, he's in the act. Don't unveil your face, for I am not a man whom you are prohibited to marry. Unveiling your face before such a man is forbidden. You are coerced to commit adultery, but you choose to unveil your face. Hence I forbid you to do so. There is no doubt that this act of forbidding evil is without merit and repugnant, and no sane person would engage in it. Of the same sort is one statement, two things are obligatory for me, to act and to command another to act. I perform one of them even if I refrain from the other. One might as well say, it is obligatory for me to perform ablution and to pray. Yet I pray even if I don't have ablution. Or the law advises me to eat a pre-dawn meal before fasting. I eat a pre-dawn meal even if I do not fast. This is absurd, for eating a pre-dawn meal is for the sake of fasting, and performing ablution is for the sake of praying. And each one of them is a condition for the other, or salah. Not praying is still a bad translation. Because praying is more wide, it's more general. And it covers dua and munajibah, or whatever the argumentation with God. They're talking to God, just talking to him. I think it's munajibah, I don't know. Maybe not. And each one is a condition for the other. Hence, it is prior in rank to that for which it is a condition. Similarly, one's own soul takes priority over the others. So let one refine his own soul first, and then the others. If he neglects his own soul and occupies himself with the others, this would be the reverse of the necessary order. On the other hand, if he refines his own soul and refrains from enjoining the good and forbidding the evil and from improving the character of others, this would be a sin, but there would be no contradiction in it. In the same vein, an infidel has no business spreading the word of Islam unless he himself becomes a Muslim. If he says that there are two things obligatory for me, and it is for me to refrain from one of them but not the other, this would not be accepted from him. We would answer that, according to us, it is permissible for the man who commits adultery with a woman to forbid evil, and hence to forbid her from unveiling her face. You say that this forbidding of evil is without merit and repugnant. The point is not that it's meritorious or without merit, or that it's commendable or repugnant, but the point is that it's lawful or unlawful. How many lawful things are dull and unpleasant? How many unlawful things are attractive and desirable? What is lawful is not the same as what is desirable, and what is unlawful is not the same as what is repugnant. A conclusive proof is that we state, his saying to her, do not unveil your face, for it is forbidden, and his action to prevent her from doing so are utterance and deed. It may be said that either this utterance and deed are prohibited, or they are obligatory, or they are permissible. If you say that they are obligatory, then this is our position. If you say that they are permissible, then he may do what is permissible. And you may say that what they are, and if you say that they are prohibited, then what is the basis for their prohibition, given that they were obligatory before his committing adultery? How then does that which is obligatory become prohibited simply by his engaging in something forbidden? His utterance that it is forbidden is true according to the law, and his deed is only to prevent her from doing what is forbidden. To say that either of these is prohibited is absurd. We do not mean by our statement that a sinner may enjoin the good and forbid evil anything, but that his utterance is lawful and his deed is not prohibited. This is different from praying and performing ablution, for performing the prayer is ordained and performing ablution is its condition. A prayer without ablution is a sin and not true prayer. It forfeits its being prayer, or salah. On the other hand, neither does man's utterance forfeit its being true, nor does his deed forfeit its being a prevention of what is forbidden. Similarly, eating a pre-dawn meal is just consuming food in advance to aid with the fast. Seeking aid for something is incomprehensible without the intention to perform that for which one seeks aid. As for your statement that one's refining his soul is a condition for improving the character of another, this is the issue of our dispute. How do you know that this is so? If one says that his purifying his soul from committing sins is a condition for participating in a war to stop the infidels, and that his purifying his soul from committing minor sins is a condition for his prohibiting major sins, then this statement would be similar to yours, which is a breach of the consensus. Regarding the infidel, if he by the sword converts to Islam, another infidel, we do not stop him. Rather, we say that he ought to declare that there is no deity but God and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, and to command others to do so as well. However, it is not established that his declaration is a condition for his commanding others. He may utter the declaration even if he does not command others, and he may command others even if he does not utter the declaration. And he might utter the declaration and not mean it. This is the bottom line of this issue. We wanted to mention it so you may know that such issues are not appropriate for the art of theology, especially when beliefs are discussed in brief, and God knows best.